This is Ross Feingold on the Taiwan Hashtag program, coming to you from Taipei, Taiwan, hosted by the Storm Media Group. Wow, we're finally done with that presidential and legislative election. I wish we could say that we won't be talking about Taiwan politics going forward, but inevitably we will. And that brings us to today's topic, because although we'll be talking about New Year, there is a political angle to New Year. We'll get to that. But first, let's say to all our friends who will be celebrating the holiday, 恭喜发财. That is the typical greeting and good wishes for the new year. It kind of means may you get prosperous. So there is this monetary angle to this greeting. So you want to wish your friends in the Mandarin speaking world a happy new year. We typically don't say happy new year. We say 恭喜发财. So all our friends celebrating the holiday around the world, we say 恭喜发财. To my friends in Hong Kong, please don't call me up and wish me this in Cantonese. Try it in Mandarin. Mandarin, 恭喜发财. Cantonese, 恭喜发财. Every year someone calls me up or sends me an email from Hong Kong. They say or they write 恭喜发财, and I'm thinking, don't you know I'm in Taiwan? It's 恭喜发财, not 恭喜发财, which is about the extent of my Cantonese. But that brings us to a very interesting topic, which is what really is the name? What should we call? How should we describe this holiday? We know it's New Year, but these things have a very sensitive political aspect as well. Kind of like, what do we call this country? Do we call it Republic of China? Do we call it Republic of China with parentheses on Taiwan? Do we call it just Taiwan? Do we call it the separate customs territory of Taiwan, Pengmen, Jinmen, and Matsu? We have a previous show about that. Please go watch our older show where we talk about what's in a name for the name of this country. Now, what's in a name for this holiday? Well, it depends on the situation and who's talking and whether they're speaking in Mandarin or in English. But let's look at some of the variations. Okay, the easiest one maybe is Lunar New Year. Yes, this holiday occurs around this time of year because it's based on a lunar calendar. What does that mean? Well, for one thing, it means that the date constantly shifts, but the holiday will begin this weekend for the places around the region where they're celebrating it. And in the Chinese characters, Hanzi, if you prefer, you don't want to say Chinese, Lunar New Year. So, Nongli is kind of the lunar calendar. Nongli Xinyan, Lunar New Year. Nongli means the lunar calendar. Xinyan means New Year. So, Lunar New Year, that is kind of a very literal description. Maybe it's not something that people would say verbally so often. Gonian, go kind of means to celebrate, so it might be used with other holidays as well. How are you going to celebrate or pass the holiday? What will you be doing on the holiday? You might say Gonian or go some other kind of holiday. So Gonian means to celebrate the New Year. Nian just means year. But in this context, if you say, like, what are you going to do for the holiday? Where will you be going? You're going to be traveling, spending it with family. You say, you know, how are you going to Gonian? So Gonian means to celebrate the New Year. What will you be doing on the New Year? Just a very everyday kind of phrase in Mandarin. Chunjie. Chunjie, again, it's a very literal description of this time of year. It literally means spring festival. Chun means spring. Jie means festival. Spring festival. Again, this one is a more formal kind of wording. It typically will cover a more extended period, so it's not just talking about Lunar New Year Eve or the first day of the Lunar New Year. It actually means the extended period from the beginning of the New Year holiday all the way through the Lantern Festival, which occurs towards the end of this holiday period. Lantern Festival, there'll be some big celebrations, a lot of lanterns, very pretty. If you're in Taiwan, definitely should go check it out, okay? But Chunjie would refer to a more extended period of time, not just New Year's Eve. So you wouldn't typically say to someone, what are you doing on Chunjie? That's not really the way this phrase is used, but it might refer more to the extended period, school holidays, for example, because schools are closed during this period. Again, it's a literal description of the holiday. And that brings us to, what do you say in English? So native speakers of Mandarin or Cantonese or other dialects, what do you say when you're talking to your friends from outside this region and describing the holiday? You know what? In years past, people used to typically say Chinese New Year, right? They're kind of talking in a way that helps foreigners understand it. And China being as large as it is, this holiday being associated with China, people would typically say Chinese New Year. What are you doing for Chinese New Year? Happy Chinese New Year, etc. However, we have to keep in mind that not only people in China or Hong Kong or Taiwan are celebrating this holiday. So the Lunar New Year is a traditional event that occurs in other locations, yes, outside of China or Hong Kong or Macau or Taiwan or Singapore, which has a large ethnic Chinese population, Indonesia, which has a smaller ethnic Chinese population, Thailand. But there are other ethnicities besides ethnic Chinese people who celebrate this holiday, Vietnam being a notable one. Some people in the United States may know Tet because there was a big battle during the Vietnam War on Tet. But Tet is a big holiday in Vietnam because they're looking at the lunar calendar. It's not just about being Chinese New Year. Korea as well, it's a holiday. So other societies around Asia have traditionally gone by the same lunar calendar. Thus, it's the Lunar New Year for them as well. It's not the Chinese New Year. People in Vietnam are not going up to each other saying, Happy Chinese New Year. No, of course not. They're not in Vietnamese and not in English. So people who are not native English speakers, when you're describing the holiday to your friends who are from other language-speaking societies, who are not from Mandarin or Cantonese or other Chinese dialect-speaking societies, you don't need to say Chinese New Year. And for the Western friends watching the show, you could describe it as Lunar New Year. And if you describe it as Lunar New Year, you will be 100% accurate. You do not need to call it Chinese New Year. So let's be fair to everyone who's celebrating the holiday and just call it Lunar New Year. We don't need to call it Chinese New Year. This holiday is not owned by China. They don't have a monopoly. We know they're trying to expand their presence around the world, the Belt and Road Initiative. There are other actions that they are taking to expand their influence, their presence, but we don't need to give this holiday to China. They have enough of their presence expansion already, so we don't need to call it Chinese New Year. Let's just call it Lunar New Year, and we will be accurate. But that brings us to a very important point for politics. Yes, we're still talking about politics here in Taiwan. President Tsai Ing-wen, with her successful re-election on January 11th, a large majority in the legislative yuan. Transitional justice has been an important topic over the past 4 years of the Tsai administration and a DPP majority in the legislative yuan. They will continue this in the upcoming 4 years. Why is it relevant to this stuff? Because the hot topic will be, how do we separate, whether informally, culturally, more formally, Taiwan and China? And believe it or not, there are still many things here in Taiwan that have the name China or Chinese or the Mandarin version of that. There are companies controlled by the government, owned by the government, that still have the name Zhonghua in the name. The Postal Service, for example, it's called Zhonghua Youzheng, right? Even though they write it in Romanization as Zhonghua Post, but actually that just means China, or it comes from the name of the country, Zhonghua Minguo, the Republic of China, Chinese ethnicity. You could interpret these in different ways. But the point is that there's still a lot of things here in Taiwan that have the name China. People overseas watching our program, of course, you'll be familiar with China Airlines. Yes, it's an airline that majority controlled by the government of Taiwan, the Republic of China, parentheses Taiwan, but the airline is still called China Airlines, and in Mandarin it's called Zhonghua Hangkong, which again just means China Airlines. So these kinds of things, will they be targeted in the next 4 years? It will be good politics probably for the government to do that. There's a long list of examples that they could find where these things probably should be updated to be more reflective of the fact that we're in Taiwan, we're not in China. Yes, it will become a matter of dispute, but this comes with being a majority, winning the presidency, winning the majority in the legislative yuan. You should have the willingness to go after these things. If it's consistent with your views and you want to separate Taiwan from China, you want to end confusion around the world, then yeah, go for it, President Tsai. Go for it, DPP legislative majority. Start targeting these things. Even government agencies, the agency that is responsible for relations between China and Taiwan, it's called the Mainland Affairs Council. Mainland, it's just a translation of the literal Mandarin phrase, Da Lu. So that is another one. It's kind of similar to the things in Taiwan that still have the name China or Zhonghua in it. The typical phrase here that has been used in the past was Dalu to refer to the mainland. More often now, people are saying Zhonggong. They're referring to communist China instead of referring to Dalu mainland. They're not even referring to Zhonggo, China anymore. So these kinds of things are becoming prevalent, not just here in Taiwan, but also in Hong Kong. And it's understandable amid all the tensions and people's concern about the activities of China, lack of freedom in Hong Kong, trying to force Taiwan into unification on China's terms. So it's understandable that people want to get rid of these kinds of names or stop using them. So I say, Tsai Ing-wen, DPP majority, go for it. You have the political capital, so go for it. Change the name of the airline, change the name of the postal service. Chen Shui-bian tried to do a little bit of this when he was the president from 2000 to 2008, DPP president. Did not have a majority in the Legislative Yuan, so it became very contentious. He'd pursue these things, and then the Legislative Yuan would fight him. And then when Ma Ying-jeou was elected president in 2008, kind of undid some of these changes. The oil company is a good example. The name used to have China in the name, China Petroleum. Chen Shui-bian tried to change that. Now they have a compromised name. So instead of China Petroleum Corporation, it's called CPC Taiwan. Please, people, politicians, don't do that. That will lead to a lot of confusion. Don't change the name of the airline, China Airlines, to CA Taiwan. That would be really, really confusing. Please don't do that. So go for it, though. If you want to change the names, you want to show that Taiwan is a separate society, a separate country from China, go for it. You have the political capital. Even the government agencies, change the name of the Mainland Affairs Council, call it the Communist Chinese Affairs Council. China definitely won't like that, but it'll get you a lot of global media coverage. The public here in Taiwan will probably be supportive or even spin it out into a separate ministry, the Ministry for Communist Chinese Affairs, instead of just calling it a commission, which is somewhat, or a council, which is somewhat more junior entity within the government, or put it in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Why stop? Go all the way. Call it a foreign country, put it in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, deal with whatever constitutional challenges come up with that. But this is the key thing here. Don't call it Chinese New Year, call it Lunar New Year. Taiwan society in the next 4 years, we're definitely going to see more of this kind of getting rid of Chinese names or separation, clarifying a separate identity. In Mandarin, it's called Quzhonghua. We'll definitely see a lot more of that. But in the meantime, we'll just say once again, Gong Xi Fa Cai, have a happy Lunar New Year, not a Chinese New Year. Have a happy Lunar New Year to all our friends watching, whether here in Taiwan, in China, or throughout the world. I'm Ross Feingold. You've been watching Taiwan Hashtag.